I still remember the smell of my old room, the faint scent of books, fabric softener, and the comfort I once took for granted. Mom had painted the walls a soft blue when I was 10, saying it would help me sleep better. She was always thinking about things like that. Little details that made life feel safer. The bookshelf Dad built still had my childhood favorites arranged just how I liked them. My science fair trophies. The guitar I was teaching myself to play. Everything had its place. Everything felt permanent. Until it wasn't. That Tuesday after school, I walked in to find all my things shoved into cardboard boxes. The boxes weren't even labeled. Just random piles of my life tossed together like trash. My posters were gone, leaving behind little squares of brighter paint where they'd protected the wall from fading. My bed was stripped bare. The guitar was nowhere to be seen. Sitting calmly on what used to be my bed was my stepsister, Rachel, scrolling through her phone like she already owned the place. She barely looked up when I walked in, just flicked her blonde hair over her shoulder and continued tapping away at her screen. "What's happening?" I asked, but I already knew. The sinking feeling in my stomach told me everything I needed to know. My stepmother, Linda, stood at the door, arms crossed over her designer blouse, that smug smile playing on her lips. "From now on, Rachel will sleep here. You'll take the garage." The garage. Not even the guest room. The unfinished, uninsulated garage where we kept the gardening equipment and old Christmas decorations. Where spiders built webs in every corner. "You can't be serious," I said, looking past Linda to where my father stood in the hallway. "Dad?" I was silently begging him to speak up, to tell them this was a joke or a terrible mistake. Instead, he avoided my eyes, staring at the carpet like it held some fascinating secret. "Respect your new mother and your sister," he muttered. "It's their home too now." Those words hit harder than anything I'd ever felt before. It wasn't just about the room. It was about how quickly he'd replaced us. My mother had passed away 3 years ago, and I had clung to the hope that my dad would never forget her or me. But in that moment, I realized he already had. "I've repainted, obviously," Rachel said, gesturing to the now pink walls. This sad little boy cave needed a feminine touch. She giggled at her own joke. I wanted to scream. I wanted to grab her by her designer sweater and throw her out. This was my mom's house. She'd picked this house because of the big oak tree in the backyard that reminded her of her childhood home. She'd planted the rose bushes out front. She'd helped me hang glow-in-the-dark stars on the ceiling when I was 8. But instead, I just stood there, unable to find words that wouldn't make things worse. "Don't make a scene," Linda warned, her voice dropping to that controlled tone adults use when they're threatening you without actually making a threat. "Your father and I have discussed this, and it's settled. Rachel needs a proper bedroom. And I don't." My voice cracked embarrassingly. "You're almost 18, she replied coolly. "Rachel still has her formative years ahead of her." Dad still wouldn't look at me. He just nodded along, like Linda was explaining something reasonable. Like they weren't erasing the last piece of my life before everything changed. "Your boxes are already in the garage," Dad finally said. "I've cleared a space for your sleeping bag." A sleeping bag. Not even a bed. That night, I slept in the garage, surrounded by dusty boxes and the freezing cold. October in Michigan isn't known for its warmth, and the thin sleeping bag did nothing against the concrete floor. I had no blanket, no mattress, just that old sleeping bag and the sound of laughter from inside the house. They were laughing at me, literally. I heard them through the thin walls, mocking my reaction and calling me dramatic. Rachel's high-pitched giggles mixed with Linda's deeper laugh, and occasionally, my father's awkward chuckle joining in. That sound broke something in me that I didn't know could break. I stared at the single bare bulb hanging from the garage ceiling, watching a spider methodically build its web in the corner. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw my mother's face. What would she think of this? Of Dad? Of what had become of our family? The garage smelled like motor oil and mildew, a sharp contrast to the comfort of my room. Outside, I could hear the neighbor's dog barking, the occasional car passing by on our quiet street. Inside, I felt hollow, like someone had scooped out everything that made me who I was. I checked my phone for the time, 2:17 a.m. No messages from friends. No one knew what had happened. I wasn't even sure how to explain it. That night, I decided I wouldn't let them see me cry. I stayed awake, eyes open to the darkness, planning my next move. I had a part-time job at the library that didn't pay much, but it was something. I had friends, though none close enough to understand this kind of situation. I had options. I just needed to figure out what they were. By morning, my resolve had hardened like cement. They could take my room, but they couldn't take my dignity. I wouldn't beg. I wouldn't plead. I wouldn't give them the satisfaction of seeing me broken. As dawn broke through the small, dirty window of the garage, I made a promise to myself. This wouldn't be my life forever. Somehow, someway, I would find a path forward. But first, I needed to survive another day in what used to be my home. The next morning, I woke up sore, cold, and angry. My back felt like I'd been hit by a truck after sleeping on that concrete floor. The small space heater Dad had grudgingly brought out before going to bed had shut off sometime during the night. My breath came out in visible puffs. October in Michigan was brutal enough inside a house. In the garage, it was almost unbearable. I checked my phone. 6:42 a.m. At least I could get inside and shower before they woke up. The thought of spending another night in that garage filled me with dread. But what choice did I have? I quietly opened the door connecting the garage to the kitchen, wincing at the slight creak. The house was silent. The kitchen still smelled faintly of yesterday's dinner, lasagna I hadn't been invited to share. My stomach growled, reminding me I hadn't eaten since lunch at school the previous day. I grabbed an apple from the fruit bowl and headed upstairs to the bathroom, careful to avoid the creaky third step. A hot shower would help with the stiffness in my muscles at least. As the water ran over me, I tried to think logically about my situation. I had about $340 saved up for my library job. Not enough for an apartment, not even close. Not in Ann Arbor. After my shower, I wrapped a towel around myself and went to what used to be my room to try to grab some clothes. The door was closed, which was unusual. I knocked softly, not wanting to wake Rachel, but needing clean clothes for school. No answer. I tried the handle. Locked. Rachel, I whispered. Nothing. I tried again, a little louder. Rachel, I just need some clothes. The door suddenly swung open. Rachel stood there in silk pajamas, her hair perfectly styled despite having just woken up. What do you want? She snapped. I need my clothes, I said, trying to keep my voice even. Oh, those. She yawned dramatically. Mom put them in your drawers in the garage. What drawers? There aren't any drawers in Not My Problem, she said, starting to close the door. Wait, I put my hand on the door. At least let me get my backpack for school. She sighed dramatically. Fine, but be quick about it. I slipped into the room, now completely unrecognizable from the space that had been mine just a day before. The walls were pink, posters of boy bands covered every available space, and my old desk was now covered in makeup and hair products. My backpack sat in a corner, at least. As I grabbed it, I noticed my guitar case propped against the wall. That's mine, I said, pointing to it. Rachel smirked. Not anymore. Mom said I could have it since you never played it anyway. That was a lie. I'd been teaching myself for months, practicing every day. That was a gift from my mom, I said, my voice tight. Well, now it's mine. And I'm learning to play it, so. She shrugged, as if that settled everything. I wanted to argue more, but I heard footsteps in the hallway. Linda appeared at the doorway, already dressed for her realtor job in a sharp blazer and pencil skirt. What are you doing in here? She demanded. Getting my backpack for school, I replied. Well, hurry up. Rachel needs her privacy. I clutched my backpack to my chest. She says you gave her my guitar. The one my mom bought me. Linda rolled her eyes. Don't be dramatic. Rachel has shown interest in music, and you hardly used that old thing anyway. But you need to figure out how to adapt to our new family dynamic. She cut me off. Now, if you need clothes, I put some things in a box in the garage. She gave me a look that said the conversation was over. I trudged back to the garage, still in my towel, feeling humiliated and furious. The box of clothes turned out to be a small plastic bin containing a few t-shirts and 2 pairs of jeans, not even half of what I owned. I tried the drawer of the old workbench where I'd organized some other clothes the night before, but it was locked. I went back inside to look for Dad, finding him in the kitchen making coffee. "Dad, I can't get to my clothes. The drawers are locked." He didn't look up. "Linda organized your things. Ask her where everything is." I did. She just said to figure it out. He sighed, still not meeting my eyes. "Just try to make this work, okay? Linda and Rachel are trying to adjust too." Adjust? By taking my room, my guitar, locking up my clothes? That wasn't adjusting, that was erasing me. I got dressed in what I could find and made a quick decision. I wasn't staying another night. While everyone was busy getting ready, I packed what I could into my backpack, just some clothes, my phone charger, earbuds, and an old photo of my mom that I'd thankfully kept in my wallet. I grabbed my toothbrush from the bathroom and the library book I was reading. That was it. My life reduced to what I could carry. I didn't say goodbye. I walked out the front door while they were laughing over breakfast in the kitchen. No one even noticed. As I stepped onto the street, I felt scared, but strangely free. The morning air was crisp, fallen leaves crunching under my feet. For the first time, I was away from their cruelty, but I was also completely alone. Instead of heading to school, I walked to the small park near our neighborhood. The playground was empty at this hour, just a few early morning joggers circling the path. I sat on a swing, trying to figure out what to do. I couldn't stay outside forever. Michigan winters were brutal, and it was already getting cold. I scrolled through my phone contacts, considering who might help. Most of my friends lived in small apartments with their families. I couldn't just show up and ask to crash indefinitely. Then I remembered Jay. We weren't super close, but we'd been lab partners last year in chemistry. His family had a big old house on the east side of town. They weren't rich. His dad was a high school teacher, and his mom worked at the hospital, but they always seemed to have room for strays. Last Thanksgiving, they'd invited 3 exchange students who couldn't go home for the holiday. I took a chance and texted him, "Hey, weird question. Do you know of any place where someone could stay for a while? Having problems at home." He responded immediately. "What kind of problems? Are you safe?" I hesitated, then wrote back, "I'm fine. Just can't stay at home right now." Long story. 3 dots appeared as he typed. Then, "Come to my house after school. We can figure something out." Relief washed over me. At least I had somewhere to go tonight. I spent the day at the library where I worked part-time, using their computers to research options. Youth shelters. Legal emancipation. Jobs that paid better than shelving books. Nothing seemed promising for a 17-year-old with no car and limited funds. After school hours, I made my way to Jay's house. It was a big Victorian with peeling paint and a wide front porch. When I arrived, Jay was already waiting outside. "Hey," he said, giving me a concerned look. "You okay?" I nodded, suddenly embarrassed. "Thanks for this. I just needed somewhere to crash for a night or two." "What happened?" he asked as he led me inside. I gave him the short version as we sat in his cluttered living room. His parents arrived home soon after, and to my surprise, they listened to my story without judgment. "You can stay in our spare room," Jay's mom said. She was still in her nurse's scrubs, looking tired but kind. "For as long as you need." "I can pay something," I offered quickly. "I have a job at the library." She waved me off. "We'll figure all that out later. For now, let's get you settled." That night, I slept on a squeaky twin bed in a small room filled with boxes and an old treadmill. But it felt like a 5-star hotel compared to the garage. Jay's little sister lent me a soft blanket. His dad made sure I had extra pillows. These simple kindnesses nearly broke me. I waited until everyone was asleep before letting myself cry. Not from sadness this time, but from relief. These strangers were treating me better than my own family had. As I drifted off to sleep, I wondered if my dad had noticed I was gone yet. I wondered if he cared. The thought still hurt, but somehow, surrounded by the quiet kindness of Jay's family, the pain felt a little more distant. For tonight, at least, I was safe. It had only been 5 days since I left, but so much had changed in my mind. The Kellers, Jay's family, had a routine that quickly became mine. Breakfast was always chaotic, with his younger siblings racing to finish homework they'd neglected the night before. His mother worked night shifts at St. Joseph Mercy Hospital, so she'd be coming home just as we were leaving for school, giving tired waves as she shuffled upstairs to sleep. Mr. Keller taught English at Pioneer High, meaning he drove both Jay and me to school each morning, his car always smelling of coffee and the mints he constantly sucked on to quit smoking. I started helping around their house, doing dishes without being asked, sweeping floors, and even tutoring Jay's little brother, Max, with his math homework. I wasn't a freeloader. I couldn't be. The shame of that would have been too much. On Wednesday, I started a small part-time job delivering flyers for a local pizza place. The pay was minimal, but it was cash in hand, and I could do it after school. Between that and my library shifts, I was exhausted, but I felt useful. I was contributing to my keep, saving what I could. Mrs. Keller refused to take rent money, so I bought groceries instead. Nothing fancy, just cereal and milk and bread. Things I knew they'd use. At night, I'd lie in that spare room, staring at the ceiling and trying to make sense of what my life had become. I hadn't told the school what happened. As far as they knew, I still lived at home. Dad hadn't called the police to report me missing, which told me everything I needed to know about how much he cared. I hadn't checked my phone much, except to coordinate work schedules. I'd silenced notifications from social media, not ready to explain my situation to casual acquaintances. But on Sunday evening, while helping Mrs. Keller fold laundry in their living room, I noticed 3 missed calls from my dad. My heart did a strange little jump that annoyed me. Why should I care if he called? He hadn't bothered to check on me for 5 days. Everything okay? Mrs. Keller asked, noticing my expression. Yeah, I said, putting my phone away. Just my dad. She gave me that look adults give when they're trying not to pry but are deeply concerned. Do you want to talk about it? I shook my head. Nothing to talk about. Later, alone in my room, curiosity got the better of me. I called him back, half hoping he wouldn't answer. He picked up on the first ring. Hello? Are you there? His voice trembled in a way I'd never heard before. It's me, I said flatly. There was a long pause, then a shaky exhale. Thank God. Where are you? Are you safe? I'm fine, I replied, not answering the first question. What do you want? Another pause. We've been worried sick. You've been gone for days. I thought maybe you'd come back after cooling off, but cooling off. I cut in, anger flaring. You put me in the garage. You let them take my stuff, my room, even Mom's guitar. What did you think would happen? I know, he said quickly. I messed up. I wasn't thinking clearly. Well, I am now, I said. I'm staying somewhere safe. I have food and a real bed. More than what you provided. Please, his voice cracked. I need you to come home. That caught me off guard. Not, I want you to come home, or we miss you, but I need you. Something was wrong. Why? I asked suspiciously. That's when he told me something strange. Rachel was missing. What do you mean, missing? I asked, sitting up straighter. Dad's words tumbled out in a rush. Apparently, Rachel had snuck out Friday night to meet some people she met online. She hadn't come home. It had been 2 days. Linda had called the police, but since Rachel was 17 and had left voluntarily, according to texts she'd sent, they weren't treating it as a high-priority case. Linda is beside herself, Dad said. She hasn't slept. She keeps saying it's her fault for being too strict. I almost laughed at the irony. Too strict with Rachel? The girl who got my room, my guitar, and probably the rest of my clothes too? What does this have to do with me? I asked. Rachel used your old laptop, he said. The police say we need to check her online activities, but we can't get past the password. We thought maybe you'd know how to. I don't know, track her or something. Suddenly, I wasn't just the useless kid sleeping in the garage. I was their only hope. The irony wasn't lost on me. Let me get this straight, I said slowly. You kicked me out and now you want my help? Please, he begged. I know we don't deserve it. but Rachel could be in real trouble. I closed my eyes. As much as I resented Rachel, the thought of her being in danger made my stomach knot. She was spoiled and entitled, but she was also just a teenager, like me. Whatever she'd done to me, she didn't deserve to be lost or hurt. "I'll come tomorrow after school," I said finally. "I can look at the laptop then." "Thank you," Dad breathed, relief evident in his voice. "Do you need a ride? I can pick you up." "No," I said quickly. "I'll get there myself." I hung up, my mind racing. I hadn't expected to return home so soon or under these circumstances. Part of me was tempted to ignore the whole situation. Let them deal with their own problems. But another part of me knew I couldn't do that. Not if Rachel was really in danger. I knocked on Jay's door and explained the situation. "You're not seriously considering going back there?" he asked, incredulous. "Just to help find Rachel," I explained. "Then I'm out again." Jay frowned. "Sounds like a manipulation tactic to me." I'd considered that too. But the fear in Dad's voice had seemed genuine. Maybe I agreed. But what if it's not? What if she really is in trouble? Jay sighed, running a hand through his curly hair. "Then I'm coming with you." "No way you're walking back into that house alone." I felt a rush of gratitude. In less than a week, Jay had become more of a brother to me than I'd ever expected. His family had taken me in without question, given me space and support without judgment. It made what my own family had done even more painful by comparison. That night, I barely slept. I kept thinking about Rachel. Despite everything, I remembered how she'd looked when Dad first introduced us a year ago, nervous, twirling her hair around her finger, trying too hard to seem cool. Before Linda had poisoned her against me, we'd actually had a few decent conversations. She'd shown me her drawings once, surprisingly good sketches of animals and landscapes. I genuinely complimented them. That was before the competition started, before Linda made everything a zero-sum game between us. Morning came too quickly. I went through the motions at school, unable to focus on classes. Jay kept giving me concerned looks. After final bell, we walked to his house to drop off our things. "You sure about this?" he asked as we headed toward my old neighborhood. "No," I admitted, "but I have to try." The walk took 20 minutes. With each step closer to the house, my anxiety grew. What would it be like to walk back through that door? Would Linda still look at me with that smug disdain? Would Dad meet my eyes this time? More importantly, was Rachel really missing, or was this some elaborate ploy to get me back? As we rounded the corner onto my street, I got my first answer. A police car was parked in our driveway. This wasn't a trick. Something was really wrong. Jay squeezed my shoulder. "I'm right here," he said quietly. I nodded, took a deep breath, and walked up the path to what used to be my home, unsure of what waited for me inside, but certain that whatever happened next would change everything again. I agreed to come back, but I didn't do it for them. I did it because no matter what Rachel had done to me, she didn't deserve to be lost or in danger. The walk up the driveway felt surreal, like I was moving through someone else's memory. The flowering crabapple tree Mom had planted was dropping its leaves now, creating a carpet of red and orange across the lawn no one had bothered to rake. Jay stood beside me, solid and reassuring. "I'll wait outside if you want privacy," he offered. "But I'm staying nearby." "No," I said quickly. "Come in with me." When I knocked on my own front door, a strange feeling in itself, it swung open almost immediately. My father stood there, unshaven and hollow-eyed. He looked like he'd aged years in the 5 days since I'd left. Behind him, the house was dark, curtains drawn despite the afternoon sun. "You came," he said, relief flooding his voice. He moved as if to hug me, then stopped, uncertainty crossing his face. I stepped past him without the hug. "This is Jay," I said. "He's coming in too." Dad nodded, too desperate to argue. "Of course, yes. Thank you for bringing." I brought myself, I corrected him. "Jay's family has been letting me stay with them." He flinched at that, but said nothing as we walked into the living room. The house was quiet. No television, no music, none of the sounds that had filled it since Linda and Rachel moved in. The silence felt oppressive, like the air before a storm. Linda sat on the couch, her normally perfect makeup streaked with tears, her designer clothes replaced by wrinkled sweatpants and a t-shirt. She looked up as we entered, and for once, there was no disdain in her eyes, just raw fear. "Did you find anything?" she asked my father, barely registering my presence. "This is Jay," my father repeated awkwardly. "And they're here to help with the laptop." Linda finally seemed to notice me. She straightened slightly, a flash of her usual composure returning. "Thank you for coming," she said stiffly. I didn't acknowledge her thanks. "Where's the laptop?" Dad led us to the kitchen table where my old silver laptop sat, open but locked. "The police took her phone," he explained, "but they said to check her online accounts too. We can't get past your password." I sat down and entered the password, Mom's birthday, something I'd never told anyone. The screen unlocked to show exactly what I'd left behind, a half-written English essay and a few browser tabs about college applications. "She must have created her own user account," I said, navigating to the login screen and seeing a new user named Rachel's alongside mine. "Can you get into it?" Linda asked, hovering nervously. "Maybe." Admin privileges on the laptop were still mine. I could reset her password, but decided to try something else first. "What's her birthday?" "March 16th, Linda provided immediately. I tried 0316 as the password. Nothing. Then Rachel 0316. Nothing again. Jay leaned over. "Try her favorite band or something." Linda shook her head. "She changes favorites every week." "What about a pet's name?" I suggested. "Her cat from before we moved here," Linda said suddenly. "Pixel." She still has pictures of him everywhere. I typed Pixel 0316 and the account unlocked. Rachel's desktop was cluttered with downloaded images, mostly of anime characters and band logos. I opened the browser history and began scrolling through. Most of it was typical teenage stuff, YouTube, Instagram, TikTok. But there was also a site I didn't recognize called Real Talk Forum. "What's this?" I clicked on it. The forum appeared to be for teenagers to discuss real issues without adult supervision. Rachel had been active in several threads, particularly one called Escape Plans. My stomach tightened as I read through her posts. Rachel Silver 98. "My stepdad tries, but my mom is so controlling. I can't breathe in this house." Rachel Silver 98. "Anyone in Michigan want to meet up? I need to get away for a weekend." Dark Angel 447. "I'm in Detroit. Could pick you up if you can get to Ann Arbor Station." I scrolled further, finding more recent exchanges with this Dark Angel 447 person, arranging a meeting time and place. "Friday night at the bus station downtown." "She went to meet someone from this forum," I said, turning the screen so they could see. "Someone called Dark Angel 447 who is going to drive her to Detroit." Linda's hand flew to her mouth. "Oh God." Jay had pulled out his phone and was already searching. "There's an IP tracker extension we can install," he said. "My cousin uses it for his gaming group. Might help locate this person if they're still active." I nodded, installing the extension Jay suggested. When we returned to the forum, we were able to see that Dark Angel 447 was currently online. The IP address showed a location in Ypsilanti, just outside of Ann Arbor. "That's something," I said, writing down the information. "We should call the detective and give them this." Dad was already dialing. I continued searching Rachel's activity, finding more posts that painted a picture of a lonely, angry teenager desperate to escape what she saw as a controlling environment. The irony wasn't lost on me. While Dad spoke with the police, I found Rachel's email and checked her inbox. Among school announcements and spam was a confirmation for a motel reservation in Ypsilanti, the Red Roof Inn on Washtenaw Avenue. The reservation was for 3 nights, ending tomorrow. "Dad," I interrupted his call. "Tell them to check the Red Roof Inn in Ypsilanti. She made a reservation there." He relayed the information, his voice tight with urgency. When he hung up, he said, "They're sending someone now." We sat in tense silence after that. Linda paced the living room, occasionally wiping fresh tears. Dad kept checking his phone for updates. Jay texted his parents to let them know what was happening. I felt strangely detached, like I was watching a movie about someone else's family crisis. An hour passed before Dad's phone rang. He answered immediately, listening intently before his shoulders sagged with relief. They found her, he told us. She's safe. They're bringing her home now. Linda burst into fresh tears, collapsing onto the couch. Dad sat heavily beside her, his hand finding hers. "Thank you," he said to me, his voice thick. "Without you." I just nodded, not trusting myself to speak. Part of me wanted to leave immediately, to return to the safety of Jay's house and forget this whole episode. But another part knew I needed to see this through. Jay put his hand on my shoulder. "You want to go?" I shook my head. "Not yet." We waited another 40 minutes before a police car pulled into the driveway. Through the window, I watched as an officer escorted Rachel to the door. She looked small and defeated, nothing like the smug girl who had claimed my room and my life. Linda flew to the door, enveloping Rachel in a desperate hug. Rachel stood stiffly at first, then gradually melted into her mother's embrace, her shoulders beginning to shake with sobs. They came inside, followed by a female officer who explained that Rachel had been found alone in the motel room. The person she'd arranged to meet, a 24-year-old man, not the teenage girl she'd expected, had left her there after taking most of her money and her phone. "She's lucky," the officer said quietly. "These situations often end much worse." Rachel finally noticed me standing there. Our eyes met across the room. For a moment, neither of us moved. Then, to my complete shock, she broke away from her mother and ran to me, throwing her arms around my waist. "I'm sorry," she sobbed into my shirt. "I'm so sorry." Awkwardly, I patted her back, unsure what to say. This wasn't the same girl who had laughed as I was banished to the garage. This girl was broken, frightened, and suddenly much younger than her 17 years. As Rachel clung to me, I caught Linda's eye over her head. For once, there was no hostility there, only a complicated mixture of gratitude and shame. The girl who had helped drive me from my home now cried in my arms, and I found myself whispering, "It's okay. You're safe now." And in that moment, despite everything that had happened, I meant it. The days after Rachel returned were filled with uncomfortable silence. The house that had once buzzed with Linda's constant redecorating plans and Rachel's music now felt like a library after hours. Everyone moved carefully, speaking in hushed tones as if normal volume might shatter some fragile peace. I'd agreed to stay the night after Rachel's return, sleeping in the guest room that had somehow remained untouched during the great room redistribution. Jay had gone home reluctantly, extracting promises that I'd call if I needed anything. The Kellers continued to hold my spot, no questions asked. Breakfast the next morning was surreal. My stepmother tried to be nice, offering me pancakes, asking if I wanted orange juice or apple. Her voice had lost its usual sharp edge. My dad kept glancing at me across the table, opening his mouth like he wanted to say something important, then closing it again. Rachel didn't come down until nearly noon. When she did, her eyes were puffy from crying or lack of sleep, maybe both. She took the chair opposite mine at the kitchen table, where I was working on homework I'd brought with me. "Hey," she said, her voice barely audible. "Hey," I replied, not looking up from my calculus problem. Linda appeared from nowhere, hovering anxiously. "Rachel, honey, are you hungry? I can make you something." Rachel shook her head. The silence stretched until Linda retreated to the living room, leaving us alone. "So," Rachel twisted a strand of hair around her finger, "you're staying at someone's house?" I nodded, still focused on my homework. "Are they nice to you?" The question made me look up. The concern in her voice seemed genuine. "Yeah," I said slowly. "They're good people." She nodded, picking at a loose thread on her sleeve. "That's good. You deserve that." I didn't know what to say to that. It was possibly the nicest thing she'd ever said to me. The next day followed a similar pattern. My stepmother tried too hard, making my favorite foods, or what she thought were my favorites, asking if I needed anything. My dad finally apologized, actually looked me in the eye over dinner, and said he was sorry. He said he didn't realize how far things had gone, that he'd been so focused on making his new marriage work that he'd neglected his most important job, being my father. I nodded, but the truth was, I didn't trust their words. People don't change overnight. The same father who had avoided my eyes while sending me to sleep in a freezing garage was now claiming he'd made a mistake. The same stepmother who had smirked at my humiliation was now acting like June Cleaver. It felt like a performance, and I couldn't tell if the audience was me, Rachel, or themselves. On my third day back, Rachel came to my room, or rather, the guest room where I was staying. She knocked softly, waiting for my invitation before entering. Another change. "Can we talk?" she asked, hovering in the doorway. I put down the book I was reading. "Sure." She sat on the edge of the bed, as far from me as possible. "I never thanked you for helping find me." I shrugged. Anyone would have done the same. "No," she said firmly. "Not anyone. Not after how I treated you." She took a deep breath. "I was awful to you. Taking your room, your things. I knew it was wrong. I didn't care." I waited, letting her continue. "The truth is," she looked down at her hands, "I was jealous. Dad talked about you constantly before we moved in. How smart you were, how you were just like your mom. I'd never had a dad before, you know? My real dad left when I was 3. And suddenly I had one, except he was already looking at someone else's kid like she hung the moon. I hadn't considered that perspective before. He never acted like that with me," I said quietly. "Not after you moved in." "Because Mom made sure of it," Rachel admitted. "She said we had to establish ourselves in the family, that you'd had him to yourself for too long." She looked up, her eyes watering. "It doesn't make it okay, what we did. I'm just trying to explain." Outside, a car honked. Through the window, I saw Jay's dad's station wagon pulling into the driveway. I'd texted him earlier, asking for a ride back to their house. "I have to go," I said, standing up. "They're here for me." Rachel stood too. "Are you coming back?" I considered lying, giving a vague answer to avoid another confrontation. But something about these 3 days of awkward apologies and careful interactions had exhausted my capacity for polite evasions. "No," I said simply. "I'm not moving back in." She nodded, like she'd expected this answer. I wouldn't either. On my way downstairs, I encountered my father sitting alone in the living room, staring at nothing. He looked up as I approached, hope briefly lighting his features. "My ride's here," I said. "Oh!" The hope dimmed. Are you coming back later?" I shook my head. I told them I would stay with Jay for now. I hesitated, then added, "I need time, and you all need to understand that forgiveness doesn't come overnight." He nodded, his eyes filling with tears. "I know. I miss you." Those 3 words pierced something in me that I'd thought was already completely broken. For a moment, I was tempted to say I'd come back, to try again, to believe that this time would be different. But the memory of that cold garage floor was still too fresh. "I miss the way things were too," I said softly. "But they can't go back to that. And I can't pretend the last week didn't happen." He wiped his eyes with the back of his hand. "I understand. Can we at least talk sometimes? Maybe meet for coffee or something?" I nodded. It was a small concession, but one I could live with. "I'd like that." As I gathered my backpack and the few belongings I'd brought, my stepmother appeared from the kitchen. Her usual perfect makeup was absent, making her look older and somehow more human. "I know you probably hate me," she said, her voice lacking its usual confidence. "And you have every right to, but I want you to know I'm sorry. Truly sorry." I looked at her for a long moment. "I don't hate you," I said finally. "I just don't trust you. There's a difference." Her eyes widened slightly, then she nodded, accepting this truth. "Fair enough." Rachel came downstairs as I was about to leave. She handed me a small package wrapped in notebook paper. I wanted you to have this back." I unwrapped it to find the framed photo of my mother that had been in my room, the one I thought was lost when they cleared my things out. It showed her at the lake, laughing into the camera, her hair blowing in the wind. It was my favorite picture of her. "Thank you," I whispered, my throat suddenly tight. "I found it when I was cleaning," Rachel said. "It seemed important." My father cried when I left again, and for the first time, I think he realized I wasn't a kid anymore. I had grown stronger because of what they did, not thanks to them, but in spite of them. As Jay's dad pulled away from the curb, I watched my father standing on the porch, looking smaller than I remembered. In the car, Jay didn't ask questions. He just turned up the radio and tapped the rhythm on the steering wheel, giving me space to breathe. Out the window, Michigan autumn was in full display, trees blazing with color against a steel-gray sky. Despite everything, it was beautiful. "You okay?" Jay finally asked as we turned onto his street. I considered the question, really considered it. Was I okay? My family had fallen apart. I was basically homeless, relying on the kindness of people who hardly knew me a week ago. My future was uncertain at best. And yet, something had shifted inside me during those 3 days back home. Seeing my father's tears, Rachel's remorse, even Linda's awkward attempts at making amends, it hadn't fixed anything, but it had shown me that actions have consequences. Sometimes those consequences change people. Sometimes they don't. Either way, I didn't have to stick around to find out. "Yeah," I said, surprised to find I meant it. "I think I am." Months passed. The Michigan winter arrived with its usual vengeance, coating everything in layers of snow and ice. The Kellers' old Victorian house creaked and groaned with the cold, but inside was always warm, not just from their ancient radiators that clanked through the night, but from something deeper. I found a part-time job at the community center helping kids with schoolwork after class. The pay was better than the library, and the hours fit around my own school schedule. Most of the kids came from Ypsilanti's struggling neighborhoods, their parents working multiple jobs just to stay afloat. Working with them gave me perspective. My situation was difficult, but I had people looking out for me. Many of these kids weren't so lucky. Jay's family never pressured me about how long I'd stay. "As long as you need," his mom would say whenever I tried to bring it up. But I couldn't help noticing how cramped the house felt with an extra person, how the grocery bills strained their budget, even with my contributions. So I started saving up for my own place, tucking away half of every paycheck. By February, I had a decent amount saved, enough for a security deposit on a small apartment once I turned 18 in April. I had started looking at listings online, focusing on the cheaper areas near campus where student housing kept prices somewhat reasonable. "You know you don't have to rush," Jay said one evening as we sat at the kitchen table, me with apartment listings, him with college application essays. "Mom and Dad like having you here." "I know," I replied, "but I need to stand on my own feet." He understood. That was the thing about Jay and his family. They never tried to force their ideas of what was best onto me. They offered suggestions, support, sometimes guidance, but the decisions remained mine. I still talk to my dad sometimes. We'd progressed from awkward phone calls to meeting for coffee every couple of weeks at the Starbucks near his office. He'd been going to therapy, he told me during one of these meetings, learning to understand how he'd failed not just as a father, but as a person. "I was so afraid of being alone after your mom died," he admitted one snowy afternoon, steam rising from his cup. "I thought I needed anyone, to fill that space." I didn't realize I was pushing away the most important person I already had. I appreciated his honesty, even as it hurt to hear. "Linda was different then too, wasn't she?" I asked. "Before you got married." He nodded, looking older than his 43 years. "Or she showed me a different side." "I don't know anymore. But that's no excuse for what I allowed to happen to you." These conversations were difficult but necessary. They didn't erase the pain or suddenly make everything better, but they created space for something new to grow, not the blind trust of childhood, but a cautious adult relationship based on truth and boundaries. Rachel texted me sometimes. She was trying to be a better person, and I appreciated that. At first, her messages were tentative apologies, questions about school, safe topics. Gradually, they evolved into real conversations. She'd been accepted to Michigan State for the fall, planning to study veterinary medicine. She was taking art classes at the community college on weekends. She'd stood up to her mother when Linda suggested repainting the entire house to get a fresh start. "I told her it wouldn't erase what happened," Rachel wrote one evening. She didn't speak to me for 2 days, but I think she needed to hear it. I never forgot what it felt like to be thrown away like I didn't matter. That pain didn't disappear, it became a part of my story, a lesson carved deep into who I was becoming. But I was learning that holding on to anger only gave them continued power over me. Letting go wasn't forgiveness exactly, more like choosing my own path forward. By March, something unexpected happened. Mrs. Chin, my calculus teacher, pulled me aside after class. "Your essay submission to the Michigan STEM Scholarship was exceptional," she said. "The committee wants to interview you next week." I had forgotten about that application, completed months ago before everything fell apart. It offered a full ride to UMass engineering program to 5 students across the state. Thank you, I stammered. "I'll be there." That night, I told the Kellers over dinner. They celebrated as if it were their own child's achievement. Mr. Keller even brought out a bottle of champagne, pouring a small amount into everyone's glasses, even Max's. To new beginnings, he toasted, his eyes crinkling with genuine joy. The interview went well. 2 weeks later, I received the email. I'd won the scholarship. For years of college covered. A future that had seemed impossibly distant was suddenly within reach. I called my dad with the news. He cried again, but this time from pride. "Your mother would be so proud," he said. And so am I. Coming from him, those words meant more than I expected. I found myself crying too, standing in the Keller's backyard with snow melting around my boots, phone pressed to my ear. Not from sadness this time, but from the strange realization that life could change so dramatically in just a few months. For worse, yes, but sometimes for better. In April, just after my 18th birthday, I signed a lease on a small studio apartment near campus. It wasn't much, basically one room with a kitchenette and a bathroom smaller than some closets. But it was mine. The Kellers helped me move in, bringing housewarming gifts, dishes, towels, a small plant that Mr. Keller swore was impossible to kill. "You sure about this?" Jay asked as we carried the last box up 3 flights of stairs. "Living alone?" I looked around the small space, at the second-hand furniture and bare walls waiting to be filled. "I'm sure. I need to know I can do this." He nodded, understanding as always. That first night alone in my apartment was strange. After months of the Kellers' noisy household, the silence felt oppressive. I opened the window to let in the sounds of spring students laughing on the sidewalk below, a distant car alarm, the world continuing outside my small space. I made dinner on my second-hand hot plate, sat on my futon bed, and felt something close to contentment. My phone buzzed with a text from Rachel. "How's the new place?" I sent her a photo of my sparse apartment. She replied with a thumbs up and a house emoji. Another text came in from my dad. "Proud of you, kiddo. Let me know if you need anything." I wrote back, "I'm good, thanks. Coffee next week?" "Absolutely," he responded. I never moved back home, never returned to what had been. But slowly, carefully, I was building something new. A relationship with my father based on adult terms. A tentative friendship with Rachel. A polite distance with Linda. It wasn't perfect, but it was honest. Today, I walk with my head high. I'm not just the kid they tried to erase. I'm the one who stood up, walked away, and built something better from nothing. They may have told me to sleep in the garage, but now, they can't even reach the place I've grown into. On my wall hangs a single photograph, my mother at the lake, laughing into the camera. Beside it now is a new one, me standing in front of the engineering building at the Kellers surrounding me, all of us smiling. 2 families, one lost, one found. Both part of my story. As spring turns to summer, I sometimes walk past my old house. The roses my mother planted still bloom in the front yard. The big oak tree still stands tall in the back. The house holds memories, good and bad, but it's just a building now. Not my home, not my prison. Just a place I used to live. My home is wherever I choose to make it. My family is both blood and chosen. My future is unwritten, and for the first time in a long time, I'm excited to see what comes next. That journey, from the cold garage floor to standing on my own, wasn't easy. But I wouldn't trade it for anything. It made me who I am today, stronger, wiser, and finally, completely free.